Dr. Sithembiso Bhengu, who's the director of the Chris Hani Institute, joins us now for more. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, Dr. Bhengu. This is a very difficult time for your party, given Chris Hani, his legacy, and what happened to him. But I suppose also for many South Africans who don't belong to the party, but remember the assassination and the man who killed him. It seems, though, that the highest court in the country, which normally is the final word, has spoken. What can be done further than that?
Thank you very much, Peter, for the opportunity. Well, yes, the highest court in the land has made a final decision, but as you are aware, one of the good things with our constitutional democracy and our constitutional order is that there is opportunities to still be able to, what the Communist Party has done, to actually submit an application for a review to rescind the judgment, which actually goes hand in hand also with an application for a stay of the actual execution of the judgment that has been done. And so part of the possibilities and part of the positive aspect about our constitutional order is the fact that there are still opportunities even when a decision has been done by the Constitutional Court, which actually has been followed by the Hani family and the South African Communist Party.
What's your feeling as the Chris Hani Institute about, A, this pending release, because the authorities have been given an order and that Janusz Walus must be set free?
Well, obviously, in terms of the law, we do understand that if the application for a review to rescind, as well as the application for a stay of the execution is not received or is denied by the Constitutional Court, then the authorities obviously will have to follow the law, which is currently about the actual release of Mr. Janusz Walus. But obviously, we already have heard earlier the fact that he's now been granted an exemption in terms of residence, so that if that happens, he is actually we will actually still be within South Africa to actually honor the kind of parole, as opposed to what actually was the initial proposition by his lawyers, that in case he is released, he is immediately facilitated for deportation to Poland.
What's the ideal scenario for you? What do you think is the best way forward? That he dies in jail?
The best scenario forward, it has never been for him to die in jail necessarily. The best ideal way forward, and always which has been the main complaints both of the family and also the real gripe with the Communist Party and many others who are challenging the issue of his release. Let's go back, by the way, 1996, Mr. Janusz Walus applies for to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to be pardoned. But in that process, he fails to disclose, and the result is that he did not provide sufficient information. And that has been the main challenge within this case of Mr. Janusz Walus, and that in the 29 years since the assassination of Chris Hani, Mr. Janusz Walus has not found it in himself to be able to actually disclose, to actually be transparent around what were the factors. Obviously, we all know the significance of the assassination of Chris Hani. It almost put the entire country on a thread. And with many attempts that have been made by the family, by the party, and many others to say, if Mr. Janusz Walus can be able to be transparent, and disclose what are the factors, because that then will give, firstly, the family proper closure to know what really were the factors leading to, but it will also enable the country to be able to move forward. And so what is really happening with this case now coming back, it's almost in many ways reopening old wounds that were never really healed, because we are never really clear as to Mr. Janusz Walus pulled the gun, but on whose instruction, who provided the weapons. There are all of these conspiracies still flying around, and so the case is never really settled.
Could it have been as simple as he was a hired gun and that the person who knew more was Clive Derby Lewis?
From what is the case, it does not seem so, because W. Lewis obviously was a politician, but we were not given facts that show that W. Lewis had access to the military, as we know that the weapon seems to be a military issue. How does that become the case that a military issue is given to a civilian? So there are all of these, almost conspiracy theories that are flying around. This one was involved, that one was involved. That continues to muddy the waters, and that continues to, especially the loved ones, the family, it continues to keep them in a sense of loss, in a sense of grief, never really being able to move forward. That is the key challenge.
There are a number of legal challenges and hurdles that are in the way now. His whole residency issue is being questioned because his lawyers are saying that he should be the one applying for it. You can't apply on his behalf. The other questions being raised by the lawyers is that if he is kept in the country, the taxpayers will have to protect him, feed him, and accommodate him, and he may still remain unremorseful. Is that a burden that we should be, as taxpayers, bearing to take care of this person? He was stabbed in prison yesterday, which further cements the idea that we're going to have to provide him with protection.
Well, the law in South Africa around parole is that the conditions for parole, you have to be able to serve them in conditions in which the state correctional services and the authorities will have access to be able to actually adjudicate whether you are complying with the parole mechanisms or not. Now, that cannot happen if Mr. Janusz Walus is extradited or is deported back to Poland. By the way, we are also aware that, in fact, a number of right-wing anti-communist organizations in Poland have already announced around a hero's welcome and all kinds of things, even in soccer stadiums, his face is put there. And so chances are is that it will essentially defeat the purpose of the actual parole and what parole is supposed to do to an inmate if he then he is deported, which is an important aspect. We have been told that Mr. Walus is remorseful and is a changed person and behaved properly. Those things are only going to be possible to be judged when he is released. But if he's still in the country, outside of the country, you can't really be able to judge the authenticity of those kind of claims.
All right. I suppose we wait to see what happens with the rescission, and then the next steps will be taken after that. Dr. Bhengu, thanks very much indeed for joining us tonight. Thanks for your time. All right. That's Dr. Sithembiso Bhengu, who's the director of the Chris Hani Institute, which is a think tank that was enacted 2003, I think, by the SACP and COSATU, mostly about educating their party cadres about the work of left-wing politics and ideologies.